Good evening. Nice to see everybody here tonight. I'm kind of used to talking behind a microphone, but it's usually at the high school announcing a football game or a soccer game. So if I get a little excited here, I'll try not to say anything about three-point shots, but just bear with me, please. First of all, I'd like to thank the pastors here at our Saviour's for inviting me to speak about my struggle of the past 17 years with a sickness called depression. And a special thanks to Pastor Maria for helping me prepare for tonight. First of all, let's define depression. Up on the PowerPoint there. The World Health Organization defines depression as a common mental disorder that presents with depressed mood, loss of interest or pleasure, feelings of guilt or low self-worth, disturbed sleep or appetite, low energy, and poor concentration. A couple other definitions here. One would be for antidepressants, a drug used to prevent or treat clinical depression. And from the medical dictionary, medications prescribed to relieve major depression. Suicide, the intentional taking of one's own life, the action of killing oneself intentionally. Untreated depression is the number one cause of suicide. So now a little background of my life. I was raised in a family of 5 boys, me being the second to the oldest. We were all baptized in the Catholic faith. I had my first communion, was confirmed, and went to religion classes on Saturdays. My mother, being a devout Catholic, made sure we went to church every Sunday and Holy Day without fail. Being raised in the 1950s and 60s, we didn't have a lot, but we never went hungry, and we were always well-dressed, mostly from second-hand stores or garage sales, but there was always a lot of love and laughter in our home. I inherited my mother's gift of gab, her quick wit, and ability to make friends wherever I went. I had a great childhood and was basically a very happy-go-lucky kid. I always enjoyed school, well, most of the time. Moved right along into high school and was voted class clown my senior year. I think you can see where this is going. I was always on an uphill plane. In my early 20s, I decided I didn't like the direction my social life was taking, so I decided to quit drinking, quit partying so much, and from there my life just kept getting better and better. I bought my first home at age 25. Met the girl of my dreams at 27, and I asked her to spend the rest of her life with me and was married at age 30. My life just couldn't have been any better. At age 35 in 1988, our first son, Colin, was born, and you talk about proud parents. We were so thankful to God for allowing us to be parents. In September of 1991, Judy was almost 6 months pregnant when tragedy struck, and our beautiful daughter, Catherine Elizabeth, was delivered stillborn and taken to heaven to be with our Lord. This was a very difficult time for Judy and me, but with counseling and communication between us and with much love for each other and our son Colin, and with God's help, we managed to get through it to resume a somewhat normal life. But our hearts were indeed broken. For solace, Judy took to writing and journaling. I retreated into the basement to finish a playroom I had started before Catherine died. In January 1993, we were again blessed with our second son, Christian. He was born redheaded and healthy. Our prayers had been answered again. In the spring of 1993, we set off to find our dream home. After months of looking, we ended up in East Bethel, and there we found our castle on 14 acres. We were going to be so happy there. We quickly sold our house in Blaine and started to pack and sort 14 years' worth of life into boxes. And for those of you that know me, what a pack rat I am, it was a very daunting task. In the late fall, I started acting a little strange. I couldn't eat or sleep very well. I didn't have much energy. I thought I was having a little buyer's remorse. Molehills were quickly turning into mountains. I had asked the seller of the house if I could start moving things into the garage since he was basically already moved out. He agreed, so I quickly started moving my old garage into the new one. It was then that I discovered some keys, and lo and behold, one was for the house, so in I went. Being somewhat of a perfectionist at the time, I started to find all these faults in the house. As I mentioned, I was acting a little weird. How could I have missed all this terrible workmanship, I thought, and why would I want to move out of my perfect house into this mess? So I kept feeling weirder and weirder by the day. I didn't know it at the time, but I was slipping deeper and deeper into depression. I called my realtor, who happens to be a good friend of mine, and told him I wanted to back out of the deal. He assured me that we would probably be sued by both the seller and the buyer. I didn't know what to do. Judy told me everything would be fine. We just needed to get in and turn it into our home. I disagreed. I was quickly spiraling out of control and didn't know why. Closing day was coming soon, and I would go into that playroom. which had turned into my therapy room, and sit on the floor and cry. How could I possibly leave this house, I thought. Judy could see something was wrong but didn't know what or why either. The new place was something that I always wanted, a bigger house with a lot of land to grow and play on with the boys. Closing day came on December 29th of 1993, and I was a mess. I had lost 25 pounds. I had gone from 185 to 160. I was gaunt, pale, and confused. We moved the next day. The moving company foreman asked my friend Bubba, just who was this guy, meaning me. He had never seen so many people show up on a move before. Bubba told him that I had a lot of friends and was always there for them, and it was payback time. When the last pickup was loaded and it was time to go, Judy couldn't find me anywhere. I was hiding in a closet under the stairs, crying my eyes out. What was happening to me? I was on vacation till the first of the year, and I was trying to get a hold of my employee assistance counselor on the railroad. Her name was Jill, who was a very good friend of mine. I left her message after message, but it was the holidays and everybody was on vacation. I knew something was wrong. I was always the guy everybody could turn to help with projects, go through any crisis like a divorce or death, etc., etc. But suddenly I needed help, and I didn't know where to turn. Jill finally returned my frantic calls and asked me what was going on. She was worried about me. I happened to be driving home from work when she reached me on my cell phone, and I was having an anxiety attack. My heart was racing and pounding so hard, I thought my chest was going to explode. She told me to pull over, park the car, and open the window, and to try to get some air. Try to relax, she said, and talk to her and tell her what was going on. Well, the floodgates opened, and I tried to explain what I was going through. She calmed me down, told me to go home and try to relax, and she was going to make some phone calls and get back to me. She called me the next morning and said she had made an appointment with a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist diagnosed me as clinically depressed and wrote me a prescription for an antidepressant and sent me home. Now, antidepressants are different than a lot of types of medication in that they may take days, weeks, or even months to work in your system. I would come home from work and go to bed. I had no energy, no desire to do anything except cry and worry about what was going on. Jill asked me if I wanted to take a leave of absence from work, but I couldn't. I liked my job, and I had workaholic tendencies and needed to work to mask what was going on with me. During this time, I felt worthless. I thought I let my family down. I felt hopeless, and I had no self-esteem. The meds weren't working, and we were trying many different mixtures. They all had different side effects. Day after day, nothing was changing. On weekends, Judy would have family members and my friends come over to see me and try to cheer me up. I would just lie in my bed covered up with a sheet and cry. Nothing was working. I didn't like my doctor. She wouldn't listen to me. She found out I had alcoholism in my past, and she blamed my depression on that. Please listen to me, I asked her. That isn't it. She put me on a different drug called Prozac, and that made me much worse, and I became suicidal. I wanted to die. Jill got me in to see a psychologist. That changed things. Finally, I had a professional who would listen to me. He seemed to understand what I was going through, and he cared about me. He asked me the hardest question I had ever had to answer in my life. He said, how do you plan to kill yourself? I told him my thoughts, and it was tough. He made me sign a contract that if I was going to kill myself, I was to contact my wife, Judy, or my brother, Steve, or him, the psychologist. He was very smart. He knew I was a man of my word. I begged God to take me. Please let me have an accident, but I went ahead of myself here. How do you plan to kill yourself? I told him my thoughts, and it was tough. He made me sign a contract that if I was going to kill myself, I was to contact Judy, my brother Steve, or the psychologist. He was smart. He knew I was a man of my word. I begged God to take me. Please let me have an accident. Put me in the middle of a bank robbery and let me be shot. I needed to die, but I signed that stupid contract. I had many talks with God. He wouldn't let me have my way. It was like footprints in the sand. He just kept carrying me. He had a plan. Why was I here? Only He knew. In our old church during worship, our pastor used to ask if there were any prayer concerns. On many Sundays, I would ask for prayers for my family and friends in need. One particular Sunday at the 10:30 service, I was really having a bad day, and I asked for prayers for myself, for healing. Later that day, I received a phone call from a friend of mine from work. He had asked me if I was still struggling with depression. How did he know, I asked myself. I told very few people. How did he get my phone number? It was unlisted and unpublished. I was confused, but I told him yes, I was still depressed, and he proceeded to tell me in church that morning in Asani, where he was in church, God had spoken to him and told him to call me and tell me that God loved me, and so did he. I couldn't speak. Finally, I asked him what time of the day this was, and he said about 11 o'clock. I thanked him and hung up the phone. I was crying and told Judy that God had just sent me an angel. I told her about my friend Jerry, a 325-pound born-again Christian with long hair, a leather jacket, and a Harley. Not your typical angel. God was sending help my way. He placed so many good people in my path. I fired my psychiatrist. Well, that's a whole other story, and I found a new one who was good. He put me on some new meds and things were looking up. I saw Michael, my psychologist, 2 to 3 times a week for 6 months. Every visit he would ask me what I did that day, who I helped with that day, and what did I do with my boys. He then told me what a sad place this world would be without me in it. I begged Judy to leave me, but she refused. She said she was in this marriage for better or for worse. One day while playing with my sons, God made me look into their eyes really hard. I didn't hear any words or anything, but he was sending me a message plain and clear. We were so powerfully connected at that moment, me, my boys, and God. I saw that I could never leave them without their father. This sickness wasn't their fault. I wanted to be there for them, to teach them about life and Jesus and all the great things that I had been taught throughout my life. I knew at that point I was saved. I wouldn't be taking my own life. God had finally reached me through my sons. My energy was slowly coming back. I worked on the house a lot and was taking shape, finally becoming ours. In the summer of 1999, I was told my right hip was wore out and needed to be replaced. Well, my wife always said it was too much disco dancing from the 70s, but I'm not so sure. I had total hip replacement surgery in October of 1999 and had every intention of going back to work, but the surgery didn't go very well, and I had a second surgery. Meanwhile, the railroad had decided that between my bad hips, several back injuries, a couple of head injuries, and my depression, they were going to grant me a medical disability and retire me. It was tough to lose my job at age 46, and it set me back a little bit. I was back for a couple of sessions with Michael for a little tune-up, as they say, but it all worked out. There is a saying that I truly believe, that the good Lord never closes a door without opening a window, and that's really what happened for me. Rather than sit home and feel sorry for myself and let the sickness control me, I became even more involved with my sons. I volunteered in their schools every day. I was going on field trips, reading to the class. I ran the book fair for 10 years, and etc. So, in sports, I was coaching not only them, but many other young children as well. And I think that was God had planned for me all along. To be with kids, work with them, mentor them, encourage them, and have fun with them. Oh, I do believe I have come a long way in these last 17 years, but I still have my gray days, as I call them. But as long as I can get up and get going and keep busy with my chores and hobbies, I will be all right. I thank God every day for my life, for my wonderful wife and my family, for all my many friends, and for every angel he sends to help me in my recovery. In closing, I just want to thank you all for allowing me to tell my story, and I want to urge all of you, if you have any of these symptoms of depression, loneliness, hopelessness, no self-worth, suicidal thoughts, anything, please alert somebody. Depression is not an emotion. It is an illness, a chemical imbalance. Talk to your parents, a teacher, a counselor, your doctor, your pastor, or me. Don't try to go through this alone. There is hope and there is help. Please don't suffer anymore. In the words of my biker friend Jerry, remember, God loves you, and so do I.